It's like somebody dropped some giant beanstalk seeds at night. We woke up in the morning and there it is like, whoa,
what's going on? I mean, I think our sense right now is this isn't a fad. This isn't going away. This is actually the dominant way to code. And if you're not doing it, like, you might just be left behind.
It seems like every time you turn around, there's another headline about AI transforming something. But honestly, it feels like it's not just changing things around the edges anymore. It's like AI is reaching the very heart of how we make things, how we create.
Couldn't agree more. It really does feel that way.
And today, we are diving into, well, a really fascinating piece from the AIDB newsletter, by the way. This landed just today, March 24th, 2025.
Oh, hot off the presses.
It is. And they're talking about this concept called vibe coding.
Okay.
And it really struck me because they make a strong case that this could actually revolutionize how we build software and, get this, how we create marketing campaigns.
Really? Vibe coding for marketing. That's intriguing. I'm definitely interested to unpack that.
Yeah, so am I. So I guess first things first, right? What exactly are we talking about when we say vibe coding? It sounds kind of, almost like a marketing term in itself.
It does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
It does.
But there's actually quite a bit of substance behind it. So the term was coined, I think it was just last month, actually, by Andrej Karpathy, who a lot of our listeners will know from his work at Tesla and OpenAI.
Right. Big name in the AI world.
Absolutely. And he describes vibe coding as, well, essentially using AI-powered tools to generate code or even to execute tasks. But the real kicker here is you're doing this just by describing what you want to achieve, but not in some technical jargon. You're literally using plain, natural language. It's like, imagine having this incredibly intelligent assistant, right? And you just tell it your vision for an app, like what you want the software to do, how you want it to feel, and it handles all the nitty-gritty technical details to actually bring that vision to life.
So instead of like the traditional way of writing code where you're hunched over your keyboard, painstakingly typing out line after line of code with this very specific syntax, you're basically just expressing like the feel, the intention, the vibe behind what you're trying to create.
Precisely. You're essentially communicating the essence of what you want and letting the AI handle the translation into the technical language of code.
Wow. Okay, I'm starting to see why they call it vibe coding.
Right. And this is where things get really interesting, especially in the world of software development, because what we're seeing is these large language models, or LLMs as they're often called, are becoming incredibly adept at understanding these natural language descriptions. And they can then turn them into, functional working code. And of course, they're not doing this in isolation. They're being paired with some really sophisticated tools like Cursor Composer, Replit Agent. These are really changing the game. They're making software development much more intuitive, much more accessible.
It sounds almost like, almost like a form of magic, You just describe what you want, poof, AI whips it up for you.
Yeah.
But I realize it's obviously much more complex than that, right?
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of very sophisticated technology under the hood. But the end result, from the user's perspective, can feel pretty magical, I'll grant you that. And the impact is very real.
And what kind of impact are we talking about? Like, what are the actual benefits that developers are seeing when they start to embrace this kind of vibe coding approach?
Well, the most obvious one, and the one that keeps coming up in pretty much every conversation about vibe coding, is speed. Pure and simple, it just dramatically accelerates the entire development process. Projects that would have taken weeks, maybe even months in the traditional model are now being completed in a matter of days, sometimes even hours. I mean, it's really that significant.
That is a huge shift. So it's like, instead of spending all that time writing the code yourself, debugging it, going through all those tedious steps, the AI is essentially handling a lot of that heavy lifting, freeing up the developers to focus on, I guess, the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's all about empowering developers to iterate more quickly, to experiment more freely, to really focus on the creative side of things, the strategic side of things, rather than getting bogged down in the weeds of syntax and low-level coding.
And that kind of acceleration has got to be a major competitive advantage, right? I mean, if you can get your product to market that much faster, That's got to be a game changer for a lot of companies, especially in the tech world where things move so quickly.
Absolutely. And we're not just talking about small startups here. Even the big players, the established tech giants, are starting to really embrace this shift. I mean, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, mentioned in one of their earnings calls last year that over 25% of their new code, the code they're writing right now, is already being generated by AI. And, for a company the size of Google, that's a massive, massive shift.
That's a huge endorsement. And I think that speaks to the potential here, right? This isn't just a fad. This isn't just a shiny new toy for developers to play with. This is something that's actually being integrated into the workflows of some of the biggest, most successful tech companies in the world.
Right. And it's not just about making life easier for the existing programmers out there. This feels like something that could really open up the world of software development to a whole new group of people who maybe don't have that traditional coding background.
Yeah, it feels like it could be really democratizing.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of vibe coding. Because suddenly you have entrepreneurs, you have designers, you have people who have these amazing ideas for software, but maybe they don't have the years of experience in writing code, and now they can actually bring those ideas to life. They can build their own apps, they can create their own tools, all without having to become coding experts. And we're seeing this excitement play out on social media. Platforms like X are just buzzing with discussions about how even non-technical folks like product managers can now engage with code in a much more direct way. They can actually start to understand the texture of coding, so to speak.
I love that, the texture of coding. That's a really great way to put it.
It's a whole different way of thinking about it. And it's opening up a lot of possibilities. But, like with any new technology, there are always some potential downsides, some challenges that we need to be aware of. And I think that's especially true when we're talking about AI generating code, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because it all sounds so amazing, You just tell the AI what you want and it spits out this perfect code. But I'm sure it's not quite that simple, is it?
Not quite. There are some valid concerns that have been raised about relying too heavily on AI-generated code. Some experts are questioning whether it's always as efficient as it could be. While it can be really fast to produce, it might not always be the most optimized code in terms of performance.
So it might work, but it might not be the most elegant or the most efficient solution.
Exactly. And then there's the security aspect, which is always a major concern in software development. There's a worry that AI-generated code might inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit. And then there's a whole issue of technical debt, which is basically, if you're not careful, you can end up with this massive, messy code base that's really difficult to maintain and update down the line.
Right. So it's not like you can just set the AI loose and then forget about it. You still need that human oversight, that human expertise to make sure that the code is actually solid, that it's secure, that it's something you can work with in the long term.
Absolutely. Human oversight is absolutely crucial in this process. It's not about replacing developers with AI. It's about giving them a powerful new tool that they can use to be more effective, more efficient, more creative. But it's still a tool, and it needs to be used responsibly and thoughtfully.
And it sounds like the industry is starting to recognize this, right?
Yeah.
Are there any examples of companies that are specifically addressing these challenges, these potential downsides of vibe coding?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a really interesting example in the newsletter. They talk about this UK-based startup called Turntech. And they just raised a pretty significant chunk of funding, I think it was something like $20 million, to launch this new platform called Artemis. And they're describing it as an evolutionary AI platform. And the whole idea behind Artemis is to essentially help optimize and secure projects that have been built using vibe coding techniques. So they're basically tackling those very issues that we were just talking about head on.
So it's like they're building the guardrails, the safety mechanisms to make sure that this powerful new tool can be used effectively and responsibly.
Exactly. And I think that's really encouraging to see. It shows that the industry is taking these challenges seriously and that there are people working on solutions to mitigate those risks.
So vibe coding is clearly shaking things up in the tech world, but what about marketing? You mentioned earlier that the newsletter also talked about the impact of vibe coding on marketing. What's going on there?
Right. Well, it seems like this whole vibe coding concept has really spilled over into the marketing world, and they're calling it, no surprise here, vibe marketing. And, the fundamental idea is actually quite similar to what we're seeing in tech. It's all about harnessing the power of AI to understand, our human intentions, what we're trying to achieve with our marketing campaigns, and then using that understanding to help us create those campaigns faster and more effectively.
So are we talking about, like, instead of spending weeks, maybe even months, brainstorming ideas, coming up with concepts, designing assets, the AI can step in and kind of do a lot of that heavy lifting for you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the really appealing thing here is that it can significantly compress the timeline. A lot of folks are saying that campaigns that would have traditionally taken weeks to develop are now being rolled out in a matter of days thanks to these AI-powered tools.
That's a big deal in today's world.
Yeah.
Where everything is moving so fast or trends come and go at the blink of an eye. If you can be that much more agile, that much more responsive, that's a huge advantage.
Absolutely. And it's not just about speed, it's also about efficiency, because you can now have smaller marketing teams, maybe even individuals, achieving what would have previously required a whole team of specialists. So it's really empowering marketers to do more with less.
So how does it actually work? I mean, how do you actually use AI to create a marketing campaign? Do you just type in, like, make me a viral campaign?
Haha. Well, it's a little more nuanced than that, but the core idea is that you essentially describe your goals, your target audience, the kind of message you want to communicate, the platforms you want to use, and the AI can then generate a whole bunch of different options for you.
So it's like having this super-powered brainstorming partner, essentially.
Exactly. It can suggest different creative concepts. It can even draft copy. It can suggest visuals. It can even come up with a schedule for when to post things on different social media platforms. And it can even personalize the messaging for different segments of your audience. I mean, it's really quite remarkable what these tools can do.
And are we talking about the same kinds of AI tools that are being used in the software development world, or are these completely different platforms?
It's a bit of both, actually. So some of the tools that were originally designed for coding, like Replit and Bolt, are now being adapted for marketing automation, which is really interesting, right? Because it shows that a lot of the underlying technology is actually quite transferable between these different domains. And the results, in terms of increased speed and efficiency, are very similar. I mean, we're talking about potentially a 20x acceleration in certain marketing workflows.
Wow, that's a lot of marketing jargon being thrown around. But I think the key takeaway here is that this could be a real game changer, especially for smaller businesses, for startups, for individual creators who might not have the budget for a big marketing team.
Absolutely. And I think that's something the newsletter really highlighted. They specifically talked about how content creators are now using these tools to build their own niche marketing tools. Things like specialized apps for analyzing their audience engagement, for optimizing their content strategy, for essentially growing their businesses. Yeah. And it's not just content creators. Andrew Chen, the venture capitalist, he's predicting that this trend of AI-powered creation is going to be huge. He even uses this really interesting phrase, software memes.
Software memes, huh?
Yeah, he basically thinks that this ability to create and share these new tools so quickly and easily is going to lead to this kind of viral spread of innovation, especially among younger generations. And it's not just anecdotal. I mean, Gartner, which is a pretty well-respected research firm, they're predicting that by 2027, a whopping 40% of small-scale software projects, which includes a lot of these marketing tools, will involve AI-generated code. And that's a huge jump from where we are today, which is only about 5%.
So if Gartner's prediction is right, it sounds like AI is about to become a pretty major force in the marketing world.
It really does seem that way. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
But again, just like with the software development side of things, there've got to be some potential risks, some challenges that come with this increasing reliance on AI in marketing.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of the concerns are actually quite similar to what you're talking about earlier. There's a worry that marketers might become too reliant on AI, that they might start to see it as a magic bullet, a replacement for strategic thinking and creative insight. And, if you just blindly follow the AI suggestions without really thinking critically about them, without really understanding your audience and your goals, then you're probably going to end up with campaigns that are generic, uninspired, and ultimately ineffective.
So it's the same principle, right?
Yeah.
It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be used thoughtfully, strategically. It's not about replacing human creativity and expertise. It's about augmenting it, enhancing it.
Exactly. And I think the real challenge for marketers is going to be finding that right balance. How do you leverage the incredible power and speed of AI without losing that human touch, that emotional resonance that really connects with people?
Yeah, I think that's the key question, not just in marketing, but in all these areas where AI is starting to play a more prominent role. It's about figuring out how to work with the AI, how to collaborate with it, how to use it to amplify our own strengths and abilities. So I guess zooming out a little bit, looking at this whole picture of vibe coding, both in the tech world and in the marketing world, what are some of the bigger implications, some of the broader trends that you're seeing emerge here?
Well, I think one of the most striking things is how it's really blurring the lines between different disciplines, different professions. In the tech world, you have developers who are becoming more like AI collaborators. They're focusing more on the overall vision, the architecture of the system, and they're letting the AI handle a lot of the lower level implementation details. And in marketing, you have people without formal coding backgrounds who are now able to create and execute sophisticated campaigns. So it's really breaking down those traditional silos and opening up new possibilities for collaboration and innovation.
It's like everyone's becoming a bit of a polymath, right? You need to have a little bit of technical understanding, a little bit of design sensibility, a little bit of marketing savvy, all mixed together.
Exactly. And I think that's really exciting, because it means that more people can participate in the process of creation, regardless of their background or their formal training. And it also means that we're likely to see some really interesting, unexpected innovations emerge as people start to combine these different skill sets in new and creative ways.
So it's like this, I don't know, this kind of creative ferment, this bubbling up of new ideas and new possibilities driven by this fusion of human creativity and AI capability.
It really does feel that way, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this all unfolds in the coming years.
And just to be clear, this isn't just some passing fad, right?
Right.
This vibe coding thing has real staying power, it seems.
Oh, I think it's definitely here to stay. The fact that it's being integrated into so many different tools and platforms, the fact that it's being embraced by both startups and big companies, the fact that it's being discussed and debated so widely, all of that suggests that this is a significant and lasting shift in how we approach creation.
Right. And I think that's what's so compelling about this whole conversation, right? This isn't just about some new technology. It's about a fundamental change in how we think about creativity, about problem solving, about the very nature of work itself.
Absolutely. And I think the really big question, the question that everyone's grappling with is, what does this mean for the future? How is this going to reshape our world?
And that's a question that we're all going to have to answer together. There's no easy answer. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. But I think it's a conversation that we need to be having, and I'm glad that we're able to have it here today.
Me too. It's definitely a topic that deserves our attention.
So to bring it all back to our listeners, we've spent the last little while talking about this concept of vibe coding. And we've seen how it's already starting to transform the worlds of tech and marketing, offering incredible speed and accessibility, but also raising some important questions about quality, security, and the essential role of human oversight.
Right. It's a powerful new tool, but it's not a magic wand.
Exactly. And so for you, the listener, as you think about this shift, as you think about this world where simply describing your intent can increasingly translate into functional code or a comprehensive marketing campaign, how might you envision using these emerging AI tools in your own work, in your own life, in your own creative pursuits, regardless of your current level of technical expertise? What new possibilities do you see opening up for you? It's a really exciting time to be alive, and it's going to be fascinating to see where this all leads.
Couldn't agree more. It's an evolution worth watching, that's for sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.